Hi, and welcome to The Surprising Secret to Flat Organizations. If you're here, you're probably someone who is already running a flat organizational structure, or at least you're trying to. Or maybe you're running a different kind of organizational structure, but you're looking around and seeing the rules and red tape pile up, you're seeing the bureaucracy get bigger, and you're finding yourself sitting in more and more meetings that go longer and longer where less and less seems to get done. Whatever category you're in a good place. Today, I'm going to walk you through a few of the very simple structures that people use to run their teams and their organizations so that you can see more clearly what's working inside your own, what's not, why, and most importantly, what to do about it. And if you're interested in running a flat organization, or maybe just making your own less bulky, I'm going to give you the surprising secret to making that really work. So, who am I? My name is Alecia Huck. I'm a business consultant. Specifically, I work in management consulting. And my specialty is working with the leadership teams of fast growing companies. See, as companies grow, they all end up with growth problems. My people are pretty interesting. They usually started their company to escape the things that other people were doing in other companies. So while they get the same kinds of growth problems, they just don't want the same kinds of solutions. My people are interested in finding a way to solve those problems without going corporate, without adding all those rules and red tape, without killing the thing that makes them special. And my job is to help those leadership teams build the structures and systems that they need to fix the problems that they've got, but build them in a way that protects their culture that they're ultimately trying to create. So, enough about me. Let's get to the good stuff. So, the first system that I want to show you is an all hands on deck system. Even if you haven't heard this name, you're probably familiar with this kind of model. It's what a lot of us do when we're first starting something. It's a needs-based system. There's lots and lots of freedom. It's pretty reactive. What you do is throw a bunch of smart, capable people in a room, create the problems, and then everybody runs around just solving whatever needs to get solved. If somebody needs to order paper, the person who realizes that orders the paper. It's pretty egalitarian, and if you're a creative, high energy, intelligent, visionary, entrepreneurial kind of person, you probably love this kind of environment. It's really free, there's not a lot of stupid rules getting in the way, and there's lots of variety and flexibility. It's a little bit like if you had 5 pilots and 5 airplanes, and you run a small airport and you move people and you move cargo. So every day you show up and you sort of sort out who can do what and who wants to go where, and then people jump in planes and you get it all done. The challenges start to pop up when you add 50 more airplanes or 50 more pilots, or maybe 500 more airplanes and 500 more pilots. Now you've got passengers and cargo all over the place, along with all those people and all those airplanes. Now you've got mechanics, some planes are working, some planes aren't, the schedules are more complicated, and it all starts to need some kind of order. So what most of us do is we default to the systems that we know best, the chain of command. We've all seen this model 100 times. You've seen this organizational structure all over the place, right? It's an authority-based system. It's designed to create order, and it does that through rules and regulations. There are stricter ideas about how decisions are going to get made. There's authority, so you have to get permission to do things. You can be punished, you can be rewarded. And the thing about a chain of command is if you have a good culture and you have good leaders, it can actually be a very freeing system. It can feel great. You can get a lot of good stuff done. But most of us don't always have good people and really great leaders. And most of us have a problem with the chain of command, in part because we've seen people inside it abuse their authority. We've seen things be unfair. For some of us, the objection is we've seen it be stupid. There are just ways that the rules get in the way of doing the thing that is right, that needs to get done. A lot of us also don't like it because it's inefficient. Some of us, again, those visionary entrepreneur types, we don't like it because we don't like rules and regulations. We don't like things that are rigid. So, chain of command is what we tend to default to. It's a way to organize things that isn't inherently bad but is often abused. So, if you look around at your company and you decide, Well, we don't really want to be that. We want to be something else. What you might come up with is, why don't we get rid of some of the rules and regulations? Why don't we get rid of some of the layers? What people do to escape creating too much structure, like in the rigid chain of command that doesn't work for them, is they delete the structures that they've got, or they intentionally avoid creating structure. And so what they want is a flat organizational structure. But what they end up with is a hidden organizational structure. You see, you guys, human beings use structure to help them predict behavior, to manage relationships, to decide how they themselves should behave, and to get things done. The truth is, there's never no structure. The problem with not intentionally creating the structure that you want is that you end up defaulting to the loudest or the most ornery or the person who is the most dramatic and stubborn running everything. It can look kind of like an all hands on deck situation, but as you grow, everything gets harder and more complex, and you need structure to get things done. So they're creating something. It literally ends up looking a lot like a Lord of the Flies situation. You're not really sure who's in charge. There's a lot of politicking, and it's often the people you least want running things that end up dominating the environment. The other kinds of problems that show up are there's just a ton of waste. If you get big and you don't actually have an intentional structure and you're still operating mostly like an all hands on deck, there's just tons of waste because there's too much to keep track of and too many moving pieces. So people are jumping on stuff, doing what they can, but often they're jumping on the wrong things or doing them in the wrong ways. It's hard to know what's going on. You end up duplicating efforts. Things get missed, sometimes really important things. And this is really important. Frequent change in this kind of a system frustrates your team members. It eats up your scarce resources and it really hurts morale and momentum. The thing to remember here is that people who are entrepreneurial and visionary, those very intelligent, high energy people who can operate really well in a whole lot of change and even a whole lot of chaos, you're rare. You're in that seat for a reason because you are that type of personality. But that's a very different kind of personality than the one that you need to do your execution. If you think about it, being the person who invents a heart valve is very different than being the person who runs the manufacturing plant where the heart valve is made. You need different kinds of people, and it makes sense that you would need different kinds of structures to support each one of them and their jobs. So you want flat, but what you end up with is this hidden structure that you're not really in control of, that's sort of making itself, usually not in really positive ways, with a whole lot of downside and kind of this Lord of the Flies environment. And one of the challenges here is that people have a lot of freedom, but a lot of times they don't feel supported. Because remember, the people who are running your operations, the people responsible for execution, they have different needs than you do if you're in the C-suite and you're that entrepreneurial visionary type. So it works for you, but you got to really pay attention to whether or not it works for them. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out and recreate the chain of command, but the truth is the secret to flat is actually structure. I know that sounds crazy, but you guys, structure can look a whole bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to necessarily suck or be overly restrictive. And ironically, the most effective flat or free systems are actually heavily structured. If you look at groups like special ops teams in the military, they use a model where they rotate leadership. So they may have a different person in charge on every single op. In order to do that, they have very clear rules, so everyone knows what to do and how to make decisions. They actually teach people how to lead, and they teach people how to follow. It takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of intentionality, it takes a lot of structure and planning to create a system that can be that fluid. Tiger teams are another good example. You gather different people from different groups in the organization, put them to work temporarily together on a special project, knowing that they're going to disband at the end. You really need clear structures, deadlines, leadership, and objectives in order to make that work for you. These kinds of teams, they work best when they're outcomes based, when you create the structure to achieve the result that you need and then adapt it as needed. Again, you can get really creative. You don't have to just import all the bad problems from chain of command. The lesson isn't that you have to duplicate that. The lesson is that you need some kind of structure, and if you don't build the one that you want that supports the culture you're really looking for, you're going to end up with one you definitely don't want most of the time. Maybe you get lucky because you've got somebody internally who's going to run it really well, but luck is not a good way to run a company that really matters to you, who's out to achieve something you really care about. So, a couple of other examples. If you read Netflix wrote a book called No Rules Rules and Creativity Inc., which is a book about Pixar, they both have great examples of getting rid of the rules that don't support your goals and creating ones that do. For example, in the Netflix book, they talk about how their original travel policy was, hey, spend our money like it's your own. And then they realized that some people are just really bad with money, right? So that's not a good enough rule, but they didn't want to just copy the traditional models and spend a ton of time and energy and money micromanaging everybody's spending. They also didn't want to create a culture where everybody had to be babysat. Remember, they want massive innovation, they want tons of freedom and personal responsibility. So eventually, what they evolved to is a rule called do what's best for the company, and it comes with a two-option system for managing accountability. In one option, your manager will review and approve your spending. So they'll review all of it, they'll approve it, and then they're accountable for it. In the second option, the manager can say, I'm not going to review everybody's spending, and then the finance team will actually do randomized reviews, and you yourself just have to be willing and able to account for all the choices that you made. It's a good example of a structure that's been intentionally created to meet the cultural objectives of the organization, but still provide the accountability they need to protect themselves on the back end. So, the big picture here is you can build anything that you want to build, but the mistake that people make with flat organizational structures is thinking that flat is none. Flat is never none, and there's no such thing as no structure. Human beings need ways to organize things, and different people among us need more and less amounts of control inside the chaos. They can support different kinds and levels and amounts and frequency of change. So, our job as leaders is to think about what kind of structures do we really need to build to support the goals that are most important to us, and not just default to no structure or the chain of command, but to do the work to build something that will allow us to achieve something extraordinary. The bottom line is, if you want more freedom, add more structure, but be creative, add the right kind. So, if you need some help, you can click on these links. The first one will allow you to schedule a call with me. This doesn't have to be a big, huge formal call. You should know that typically I take on about one new client every quarter for large projects. We usually work with people that are between 5 and 75 million in annual revenue. A lot of times they've just recently brought on their first CFO. That's sort of the tipping point growth-wise for them. But I'm happy to have a conversation with you about what you're up to in your organization. I think all of this stuff is really interesting. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. We post really frequently there and lots of great videos and short things, useful information. And you can visit our library where we have all kinds of great stuff. Some of it's in video, some of it's in articles, some of it's in short posts. There's even a couple of, there's a white paper in there. There's all kinds of fun stuff. And it's all free, no email required. That's kind of how we believe in doing business over here. So I hope that this was super useful for you. And I really just want you to know it's a big deal what you're up to. Not everybody is being thoughtful about these kinds of decisions. It's really simple to just default into old models and take the rule book from some other company, some other place, implement it where you are, and not think too hard about what it is that you're building. But if you're looking at a flat organizational structure, you probably care deeply about the experience that your team has, about the kind of experience that you have, and you might even have a mission in the world that really means a lot to you. And for me personally, what I believe is that people should be able to win as themselves. You shouldn't have to be somebody you're not in order to achieve what you're out to achieve. But there are also some rules that you still have to follow in order to get what it is you want. You just may be able to make up how you follow them. So if you need some help, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you, and I wish you all the best success. Have a great day, you guys.